As we start to explore elements of the self, we're going to contrast two different ways of viewing the self. So, to take a couple of steps back, if we were to define the self with a capital S, we could define it as the individual. But more clearly defined, it's the sum of our thoughts, behavior, and experiences that makes up who we are. So let's explore the two ways of viewing the self. These are two conceptualizations that each have their own use and purpose and each have their own focus. And to keep things simple and to give you guys a broad, feeling for what these two are, even though they overlap a great deal, I'm going to use an analogy from physics. And it's an analogy that's based on light. Now, light does different things with mirrors and windows. Light bounces off mirrors and essentially pierces windows. You could also argue that it is refracted. And this analogy doesn't follow completely, but bear with me. So, identity is going to be the mirror example. It's going to be self as reflection, while personality would be thought of as self as refraction. And here's how that works. When you think of identity, you can think of yourself looking in a mirror. You can think that the light that's bouncing off the mirror reflects something back to you. And you could argue, philosophically perhaps, or conceptually, that the person in the mirror is different than you. And so in this case, I want you to think of the mirror as the other person. And this is just an analogy that's going to help you understand this as we get into it deeper and explore the theories that are behind these two conceptualizations of identity and personality. So the light bounces off the mirror and it's reflected back. Now in your house, I imagine, there are multiple mirrors. There's a mirror in the bathroom. There's maybe even a full-length mirror in the bedroom. Maybe you have a mirror in your purse or some other place in your house. These mirrors, just like the people we interact with, bounce back a different reflection of ourselves based on their size, based on where they're at in the house, how much light comes in, right? So you can think of these mirrors as other people. Accordingly, identity is a conceptualization of the self as it exists right in the moment when social interactions occur. So it's kind of a reflection between self and other, and how you and the other people around you and their identities and your identities reflect each other in kind of a loop that feeds back on itself. Comparing identity and personality as viewpoints of the self, ways of thinking about the self as very broad ideas that overlap a little bit. But now let's get into how identity is defined. And next we'll explore how identity is formed, which is a completely different thing. But start to think about it with this mirror example that I gave you in the last slide. So when you think of identity, you need to think of several identities. Identity being something that is an accumulation of viewpoints and ways of reacting and ways of interpreting the world that are based on something that you self-identify with, right? So if you self-identify as a doctor, then your identity has concepts perhaps of a healer. It may have concepts of a scientist. It may have concepts of an academic. All of these things grouped together as ways of thinking and ways of self-identifying into one identity. But that identity is tied to a specific thing.
Created using Powtoon.